Welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast. You're in the right place if you're a growth-seeking being who acknowledges the challenges and delights of your humanity on the path to an ever more conscious life. If you want to feel inspired to love and accept yourself, to feel free to be and express you in all your brilliance, if you want to truly value yourself and others and feel energized and alive both at home and in the world, then sit back and take a breath as you explore and grow the brilliance of your beautiful human self with your host, the father of non-personal awareness and creator of the MPA process, Joel Young.
Hello, and welcome to the Be a Brilliant Human podcast with me, Joel Young. We are at episode 25. Good heavens, that's a quarter of a century. So welcome if you're new to this podcast. I'm so glad you found us. Hope you enjoy this show and stay around. And thank you to you regulars. As I always say, and it's really true, I do appreciate you choosing to spend this time on a weekly basis with me, listening to these pontifications. And I'm guessing it gives you some value, which is always my prayer. To add value, a bit of entertainment perhaps to your life is always my goal. As ever, I'm really open to your feedback. Of course, make sure you subscribe. It's the first thing to do when you get here. Subscribe so you get notified when these episodes go out. You're welcome to message me, give me feedback, ask any questions, share any topics you'd like to have on the show. You can do that via the website, which is beabrillianthuman.com. And there you'll see a big button where you can press it. It says leave a voice message. You can press it and just literally record a voice message to let me know what's going on, ask your questions. Or, of course, you can let me know by email, joel@nonpersonalawareness.com, on the various social media platforms where, for the most part, you'll find me as @JoelYoungMPA. On YouTube, it's youtube.com/JoelYoung, where you'll find me there. All right. And of course, if you like what you hear, go tell somebody, which is exactly what Beth did on Instagram. Thank you so much, Beth. She actually took a screenshot of this podcast page on Spotify and shared it to her Instagram fam. She said, "Hey, folks, if you like podcasts and life guidance, this podcast will defo rock your world." Woohoo! Loving that rock reference there, Beth. And she goes on to say, "This podcast will help you navigate many aspects of life, all sorts of topics. The podcast is called Be a Brilliant Human with Joel Young. Check it out on Spotify. Enjoy." Loving that so much. Thanks, Beth. You're an absolute gem. If you want to find Beth on Instagram, she's at Bethany Oasis with 2 S's on the end. Okay, so today we're delving into the world of highly sensitive people. Now, might seem like a slight aside, but I have been interviewed many times over the years. But today is a first for me as I'm channeling my inner David Frost and stepping into interviewer mode. And my guest, Fiona Maguire, she's an intuitive, psychologist, an international speaker, author of The Key to Awareness, and expert in the world of highly sensitive people. She's also a very good friend of mine, so I invited her onto the show to separate the wheat from the chaff when it comes to highly sensitive people and inspire you to step into what's possible. So I have a few questions for you. Did you know that the brain of highly sensitive or a highly sensitive person is wired completely differently to the rest of the population? And do you know what traits let you know if you're a highly sensitive person or not? And do you know the difference between a highly sensitive person and an empath and why that distinction matters? And if you're a highly sensitive person or know someone who is, then would you like to know how to handle the challenges without becoming a victim and make the most of the gifts? Well, I thought I knew the answers to these questions, but Fiona really helped sort of clear up the fluff from the HSP fake news for me. Plus, I pinned it down on some practical, actionable points. So there's lots for you to take away. So, without further ado, beautiful listener, let's get right into it. So, hello, Fiona Maguire. How wonderful to have you. You know, you're popping my cherry when it comes to interviews. This is my first chance to interview somebody. It's something been on my radar for a while to do as part of the podcast. So thank you for that. I'll always remember you.
I had that kind of relationship anyway, Joel, that you always remember me.
Absolutely. Well, let me just say, so I first met Fiona back in, was it 2013, I think it was?
Or 2012, one of those.
2012, 2013. We were both speaking in Colorado at an event called, what was it called again? The Festival of Enlightenment, I think.
Well, it was actually as early as 2011.
Really? Oh my God, that long ago. So that's like 9 years ago. And I was really, we connected. One of the things that always drew me to Fiona was she had an uncommon directness about her. And in a world that is filled with fluff, to be frank, it was refreshing to see someone who was willing just to sort of say it like it is. You know, from her perspective, obviously, but often it was like, boom, straight in there saying what isn't being said. And I've always loved that about you, Fiona. I was talking to you. And over the years we've stayed friends. We sort of regularly connect, you know, it's like these things do. The official bio stuff, I'll give that for you, Fiona. Fiona is a transformational coach, a psychologist, by the way, adding in there with a BSc honours in psychology. So yeah, you for doing that. International speaker and the author and creator of The Key to Awareness Process. So that's pretty good. That's the stuff. But tell us, Fiona, in your own words, you know, who are you? What are you about?
Okay. Well, the main thing that makes me different from anyone else is that I've been able to tell what people are feeling my whole entire life. So their emotional state, and generally where that state has come from, what's caused it. So when I was growing up, I didn't label this anything. To me, it just was the way it was. I'd always been able to do it. I thought everyone could. And then I started to understand that a lot of people didn't even understand their own feelings and emotions, or even more serious, didn't even know they were feeling or they were experiencing an emotion. And that just confused me, because I was like, well, I know what I'm feeling and I know what my emotion is. So, and I know what yours is. So why don't you know? So I guess that confusion led me to studying psychology and working as an assistant psychologist. And it really frustrated me as a psychologist because, again, I wasn't openly allowed to read people's energy, which I then realised I was actually doing. And I wasn't able to share with them what I got from their energy. So it just made the process of psychology very slow. And I just got a bit annoyed about how slow it was and that it wasn't always effective. And I really began to realise we were treating people's mental illness, not their mental health. And I was very successful with people because I always looked for their mental health. I always looked for what was not only good about them, but the way in which their mind and their body operated in a good way. So I worked mainly with children, and the best counselling sessions were while we was, you know, doing rugby or cricket or riding my bike or whatever it was, you know, because then they could be themselves, so they would access their mental health. And then they would tell me what was up. And they'd have massive insights because they were relaxed, they was calm, and was having fun.
Yeah, I love that, because in that context, you're not like sort of in that kind of caged, focused thing of self-therapy. You're starting with a place of them just being themselves. So from that, you know, the expressions can be discovered and explored, and a light can be shone on, you know, what's natural, what's truly them, in contrast to the stuff when they go into whatever mode they go into to create the suffering. So yeah. I love that you did that. And again, I think it's not uncommon for people who do what we do to get frustrated with, you know, we have an issue with our lives or a situation in our lives, and we think, well, what can I apply that is out there to help me get through it or to understand it? And then we come up against frustrations, blocks, or we see better ways, and that inspires us to sort of go out and share and create. So we're similar in that we've created, you know, a process. We've got our approach, if you like, Yours is, the key to awareness, really, isn't it? So you wrote the book. You literally wrote the book on it. How did that come about?
Okay, very brief story. When I was 27, I'd owned my house for 4.5 years. No, that's not true. I bought my house at 27. So when I was like nearly 31, I'd owned my house for like 4.5 years. And I had everything you're meant to have to make you happy. I had a new car, I had a partner, I had my own house, I had a contract that I really loved and enjoyed. And I also ran a very successful business as a physical therapist, because I decided to take a break from psychology because I burnt out. Partly because the NHS wouldn't allow me to counsel people and play rugby with them. So they wanted me to be stuck in a box, and I'm really not a stuck in the box kind of. So I went traveling for 3 years. It just occurred to me through spirit to pack up everything I owned. Well, I actually ended up selling it. It happened so quickly. And I went traveling. And then at the end of that, I was sitting at a jazz festival in Canada, like you do, with my eyes closed, listening to the music. And then when I opened my eyes, there was this man standing beside me, and I hadn't felt him approach me, which is very unusual for me. So I was a bit curious. And the first thing that came out of his mouth was, "So what do you think about life?" And because I hadn't felt him approach me, and that was so unusual, I just decided to go along with it. Now, this might sound a bit crazy, but at this point in time, I didn't know if this person was real or if it was just an energy perception. But either way, I thought, I'll just go along with this. This is weird, but fun. So, So I opened my mouth, all this stuff come out that even surprised me. And that was the key to awareness. And I guess that's where I was at the time, and that's where my clients were at the time. But now my work is way beyond the key to awareness. I now really openly talk about energy and intuition, and how energy and intuition really is the unconscious mind. So how we can change the unconscious mind through directly using our imagination and our energy. And Bruce Lipton's one of my heroes, and I've met him 5 times. And he says exactly the same thing. And he was a Harvard scientist that came up with epigenetics, which means beyond genetics. So meeting him and getting somebody scientific that believed in my wacky theory was fantastic. And we also became friends, which was cool because, he was a bit like, "Oh, you're different." So, and also I talk about the inside out perspective, which was discovered by Sydney Banks, which when I found out that, I was really excited because Sydney Banks, he talked a lot about perception, like how the mind really works, how perception really works. And then he just easily sort of said, well, once you recognize you're not your thoughts, what are you? And as soon as you start contemplating that, it's the sage question. Every sage asks this question, who am I? And relating that to psychology and the theory of perception, which I really believed in, and then seeing, this is just a load of rubbish. This perception is just my made up thinking. And, my book is called Key to Awareness, How to Break Free from All the Shit, because I think this is a really good word. So I just say to myself, I make all this shit up, and it just makes me laugh, and it gives me space, and it interrupts that remunerated thinking that we can all get lost in. And it takes out my personal mind and opens me up more to innate wisdom, innate health. So that's cool.
Again, that's one of the things I love to sort of ponder is the idea that we're not our thoughts and, all that stuff. I think where I often go with it and the way I would language it is I say that basically we have no idea what's happening really because it's all perception. So I say if you're going to have a story, you might as well have a good one. Because all the stories are, made up anyway, right? As you say, it's all made up. So, have one that works for you. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks or, or where it comes from or if it's true. It's like just find one that feels really good, because that's what you're looking for anyway in the end. But
I had a client this morning, and we were talking about this, because he's actually been educated in the inside out perspective, and yet he has an intellectual understanding of it, but he doesn't get it from a heart, from a, I'm going to live this perspective way. And he was talking about an argument he had with somebody and how he felt, and he went into the shower and he grounded himself, and then he came up with, he decided to do a Byron Katie process. And I made him realise that actually he'd got the recognition, because when he grounded, he really opened up to his innate wisdom. And then, what to do just came on board. He knew that already. And it was afterwards he kind of intellectualised it and made it into a process. But actually, just by him being quiet, his innate intelligence came up, and he said to me, wow, I always know what to do, don't I? And I was like, yeah, we always know what to do when we're just ready to not get out of our personal rubbish in our mind and just ground and open up to something else, which is the truth of who we are.
Yeah. So one of the things that comes to mind with that is again, I see the similarity, because it's one of the things that I talk, especially lately, and with the Be a Brilliant Human podcast, it really is about coming in to the grounded space. Because I've seen the same as you, there's many people who will gain the sort of intellectual, or they'll be up in the ethers of the sort of spirituality, personal development realm. And one of my ways, it's interesting you talk about the sort of the personality aspect. I mean, I'm a fan of really honoring the personality, really going, it's part of where the expression of the divine connects into material form, is the personality. It's like the flower in a way. And so a lot of what I do and talk about is how we have tended to sort of demonize the personality, or it's mostly called the ego, if you like, and there's all sorts of definitions. That's why I don't tend to use that word. But the personality is that sort of beautiful expression. Yeah, it can be a bit crap at times, but that's why I say polish your personality, sing with your soul and bathe in your being. But if you include all of them, that's a way to look at how we can take these sort of out there ideas, but bring them into the real world, make them practical. How do you live with them? So what's your take on that?
So what you asked me specifically is, sorry, I got lost in the
I was talking about how, about honoring the personality. That's how I would language it.
Okay. So I personally see the personality and ego as different things. So my personality is something that I probably came into life with in a certain extent, and it's also been what's developed through my life and what I've learned, who I've hung around with, my parents, my conditioning. So personality gets coloured with a lot of different things, but it is personal. It is the expression of who I am. And ego, on the other hand, I see as something we all share. And, so ego from a psychological perspective is how we know that the process of getting towards an individual being. And that's psychologically an advantage, because when we're born, we don't know we're an individual being. We still very much relating to our mothers, because that's what we've been doing for the first 10 months of our existence, And so then we're still looking at them for energy clues. We still don't know the difference between their energy, our own energy, our emotions, their emotions. Everything is very mashed up. And that is becoming separate more and more quickly. I'm 45 now. I graduated when I was 22, I think, can't remember when. And, we used to think, it takes 3 years for that process to happen, and then the personality really comes on board. But that's not true anymore. individualization happens very quickly, especially in traumatic circumstances. So I've seen it as young as 6 months, where that baby is really thought, I'm on my own, this is it, no one gives a shit about me, I have to take care of myself. Of course they can't, they're 6 months. But that's the story they're running in their head. So, they're a bit dissociated, they don't know how to react and stuff like that. But, as soon as I had the privilege of treating that 6-month-old baby, as soon as you treat them, as soon as you get them back into the real them, like embodied in them rather than traumatic reactions, then that's when their personality really shines forward, the expression of who they really are. Now, even at 6 months, this baby had a wicked sense of humour, and obviously it didn't talk. There was just a sense of it, and the aliveness and the joy. So I think that as we become more awake, spiritual, our personality becomes more of an expression of who we are, rather than something that makes us special and unique, but in a very healthy way of being who we truly are, and knowing still that we are connected to everything and everyone, and we're able to have this self-expression, which is healthy.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately where I go with it, is the healthy expression of our differences. But for me, in order to really allow that, there needs to be an awareness of the interconnectedness of us all, and the wider aspects of us. So it's that, rather than polarizing between one or the other, it's like, how do you dance between these different, what are ultimately perspectives inside of us, and make the best of them. Hence, be a brilliant human, right? It's honor the human, but within the human is the personality, the soul, and the being. It's all the different parts, depending on how wide the perspective that is active is. So today, one of the things that you really have come to sort of specialize in is sort of highly sensitive people. So, and that's something that I'd love to talk about, because I think it's one of those things. We've talked about personality, and we've talked about awareness and higher sense perception, which is possibly different. I'll get you to sort of determine what the difference is. But it's one of those things where I think we can identify as a highly sensitive person, which I think it's really useful. My view on self-identification is it's really useful, in the same as that personality. It gets you clarity on where you're at in a moment. But it can also be, a tasty trap. Some identifications that are going around, like right now, especially, there's some sort of trendy identifications that are going on that could potentially aren't necessarily entirely true or consistent, but they appeal to parts of us that would cause us to be, say, a victim or something else. So what I'd love, if you can do, I don't know if you can do this, but to help, my listener, who may be asking themselves, am I a highly sensitive person, or am I just a bit sensitive, or maybe I have different kinds of sensitivities? How do you define those things?
Okay, that's great, and I will answer that. But to talk to your point about identification, I think I agree with you totally in everything that you said, and relating it to a highly sensitive person. I think for someone to notice that they're a highly sensitive person, and to notice the traits, i.e. the genetics of that and how it affects your behaviour, is really beneficial. However, I'm afraid to say most of what I've read has made them into victims.
Yes.
And what was really interesting about that is because I only started to even think about myself as a highly sensitive person in the last year. I didn't bother labeling myself before. Okay, I'm very intuitive. That was one of the labels I gave myself. But I gave it to myself. And people have always said, oh, you're an empath, or you're clairvoyant, or you're this, or you're that. And I was just like, yeah, okay, if that floats your boat, go ahead. But I wasn't into anyone labeling me anything. And I really avoided it myself for a long time, because I don't want people to pigeonhole me. And I definitely don't want people thinking, oh, well, you poor person, you're very sensitive. Oh, we've got to treat you like this because you're very sensitive. And I think maybe that's partly where my straightforwardness came from, was because people would realise that I was sensitive, and then they'd either like, or they'd try and manipulate me and abuse it in me. So I was just like, hold on, pal, this ain't happening. Either way, it's just not happening. You can just treat me as a normal individual. But the traits of, how you're a highly sensitive person, I think the most obvious one, but funny enough, a lot of people don't see it, is that you get overstimulated or overwhelmed more quickly than the general population. So a brief example of that from my own life is when I was 18, I was a professional photographer, and part of my job was to go into London, a city, and I lived in a town, but I lived on the edge of a town, and actually it was 5 miles from the town. So I lived in a nice area, Luton. There are nice areas, and there was near a beautiful park, and I had a dog, and So when I was going to London, this was a big deal, and I'd notice as soon as I stepped off the train, I would just feel sick, and quite often I'd actually physically be sick. And then I'd kind of be okay. And then towards the end of the day, I'd start feeling sick again. So I'd want to jump on the train and get home. And I just thought, well, I don't like being around people. I get overstimulated. The energy is too much. At the time, I didn't know how do I put this? How to just be okay with that amount of energy. I'll just be like, oh my God, and I'd want to shut it off and shut myself down, which a lot of people do. That's why they don't realise they get overwhelmed, because they've just shut themselves down. They're just like, you're looking at somebody and talking to them, but nobody's home because they're not feeling their own emotions. They're quite shut down, quite shut off. And yet they're highly sensitive, and they've done that as a defence mechanism. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, yeah. I've seen a lot of that as well, where, as you say, it's a survival strategy. You're born into a world more sensitive than those around you, and then having reactions that are possibly uncomfortable for people around them. Also, again, in my experience, in the way you'd consider this part of the sort of highly sensitive person, but the empathic part, which is often sort of picking up and then expressing what's going on around, which again, maybe what's being hidden in other people, for example. So I see it sometimes as expressing as people who say the difficult thing. Like, I can go either way. They can just shut down, as you say, as a way just to, it's all too much, so I'll put a shell on it, or it comes out as this sort of unfettered expression of what's trying to be hidden by everybody else, because they can't stand the holding on to that energy, which makes sense, So I think there's two potential ways that I've seen. Is that your experience?
Yeah, but empaths and highly sensitive people aren't the same.
Okay, good.
So I'm also an empath, and kind of okay with that now. So an empath basically just means that you feel other people's feelings. That's what it means in a nutshell.
Right.
So for a lot of empaths, they literally take on the feeling. So they take on the energy, because energy is a real thing. Emotion is energy, emotion.
Yeah.
They take on that emotion, and they literally then physiologically respond as if they themselves are feeling that emotion. So they might cry or laugh or stuff like that. And some empaths will know that this is that person's emotion, like I did, thank God. And other empaths get really confused, because then they're like, well, I wasn't crying a minute ago. I don't know why I'm crying. And then they get lost on a psychological journey of trying to find out the reason why they're crying, when I'm just like, oh God, his sadness really affects me. And tears come because I'm an empath that's highly sensitive. So, I'm going to have, and especially before, I'm going to have a response inside of me to their energy, even though I know it's theirs, or I know it's their emotion. So not all highly sensitive people are empaths. Not all empaths are highly sensitive people. So it's, maybe this is a bit un-PC to say, but I find it quite funny when I meet an empath who's not highly sensitive, and then the trouble they get themselves into. I was just, oh my God, here's my business card. We really need to talk.
I love that that's come up. I mean, in a way, it's perfect. I fell into a classic ignorance trap right there. Okay, so it's like making or drawing the line where I encompass both in the same thing, which is great because I love to get those clarifications. I think it's really powerful to know the difference between an empath and a highly sensitive person, because that's where labels can be dangerous when you apply a label and then it's actually not the thing. The gift of the label is the specificity, is to get really clear on the discernments, like you just pointed out beautifully there. There can be an empath who's not highly sensitive, or a highly sensitive who's not an empath, and they're actually very different sort of psychological pathways in a way, or ways to experience things. So I think that's a really cool nugget, I think, is to know that there's a distinct difference.
So what makes us overwhelmed, highly sensitive people makes you overwhelmed quickly, is two factors. That my brain, highly sensitive people's brains are wired differently, and this is proven by research. And how they're wired differently is our arousal, which is also called our level of stimulus, the point at which we get aroused or stimulated by something, is much lower than that of the normal population. So if something happens on TV, but especially if something happens to someone I care about, or even my dog, then I feel it very deeply, and because I feel it very deeply, my arousal system gets aroused quicker because it's a strong emotion that I feel, and that's a trait of a highly sensitive person. And because of that, also, what we tend to do is we tend to, highly sensitive people, that is process information at a much deeper level. So we will actually absorb for longer. We watch, we see what's happening. We make much more connections because we pay attention to much more detail. So we process everything at a much deeper level. And of course, this has advantages and disadvantages. The main advantage is that when I learn something, I really learn it. I'm never going to forget it, like my psychology degree. The disadvantage is it took me bloody ages to learn it. It just doesn't drop in like that of other people, because, or it might drop in and I might really get it, but I then want to know the detail about it because I'm detail orientated. And that just used to annoy my teachers at school and even the professors at university, because they'd be like, can't you just accept it? I'd be like, no.
Again, I find it really interesting listening to you because it's, again, really good clarification. So I came into this interview thinking I'm probably not a highly sensitive person. I'm a sensitive person and empathic and intuitive and those things. But what you just described, I can totally relate to, especially the detail oriented. It takes me a long time. That was the thing I heard. It takes me a long time to learn things. One of my biggest challenges at school and with exams is everything takes a long time, still to this day, because again, and the sense of being an observer, I've always felt like I do see everything. I don't miss anything. I can choose not to express it, but I see all that's going on, and I see what's happening, and I can make the connections and the meanings and understand the big picture and the minute picture and all of those things. But it suddenly makes sense. It's like the pennies dropping in me. It's like, in terms of sort of processing bits per second, which I know the brain and the unconscious process an inordinate amount, you're actually processing a lot of information fairly consciously when you're doing that. And like a computer, that's going to slow things, that you've got to take time to digest everything. And every detail is like an open loop as well, because it's like, so an open loop, if for people listening don't know, it's like you ask a question, the brain is sort of wired to answer it, and it hates an open loop, an unanswered question. it's used in marketing a lot. It's used in, lots of ways it's used. But it's sort of the penny's dropping for me in terms of how, God, yeah, all those open loops, because there's so much information that I'm putting into my consciousness rather than doing, as you say, oh, I'll just let it be, okay, I don't care about the answer to that. Oh, if only.
What you said was really good, that you notice everything, you notice all the minute details, you see the bigger picture at the same time, and you have this innate need to process it all, and so, that actually makes us highly intelligent often, but it just takes time. And unfortunately, we don't live in a world that thinks that's a good thing, unless you're already a scientist and then, they've shut you off in a box again, and it doesn't matter that you don't work out the theory for a year, as long as you have the funding. So, but then when we really get something, I don't know if this is your experience, but it's definitely mine. When I really get something, I then want to know like 3 or 4 steps above my knowledge, because I can work out the in-between bit, because I've already associated it with so many other things that I know, that I've worked out the between bits. It was like my teachers at GCSE, because I was one of the first years to do GCSE, used to say to me, Fiona, that's degree level stuff. Have you got the stuff that we're telling you? And I'd be like, oh yeah, but I'm really interested in that. Because I'd get bored, would be like, well, okay, it might take me a while to get it, but I've got it now. Now I'm bored. Let's move on.
Yeah.
So that get me out of the classroom, because
I can relate to that. I've definitely had experiences. No, I wouldn't say so much at school, at time at schools, because school was just I was disinterested. So one of my filters is, does it flick my switch? Then my, I guess, high sensory stuff turns on, and I was most interested in people at school, not that the academic stuff I didn't see a point to it, so I didn't really bring my actual attention to it. But certainly later, and I'd be in seminars and workshops in the personal development field, and I can think of several occasions where I'd ask a question, and you'd see the teacher or the facilitator stopping, and either I could tell at the time, either it just was a question that nobody ever asked, or even hit above where they were thinking, because you'll find it where teachers are teaching kind of what they've learned from other people, and as you say, they haven't fully embodied it, so their processing hasn't taken to those places. And I don't mean to say that to sound arrogant. It's just it's that function where you just see things you see the connections. It's like the runway, the path lights up, down and beyond, and you can't ignore it, right?
Unfortunately, I've learned to be a little bit better. I've learned to, like a flag goes up and I'm like, that will just confuse everyone if I ask that right now.
Yep.
So then I've learned to ask the teacher afterwards. But sometimes I'm just bursting at the seams and I just have to ask it.
So is that one of because I want to get into some practical things, but I can relate to that. I mean, I think I've been practicing that in the last, I'd say 3 years in particular. I got quite into astrology, and I've got like Aries sun, Aries moon, Leo rising, all fire. And I think I had to learn that thing of just take a pause before I engage my mouth. It's like because I'm like a puppy, I'm like, yeah. People be like, sort of, the thing of the fire, it ends up people being burned. It's like, oh my God, it's like that guy from the X-Men with the goggles on his eyes, and he takes them off and shoots fire out of his eyes. And I think I've tempered that, and again with not in a way which prior to that, where I was doing the shell, the limiting thing, just hide away and be invisible, which is more my childhood response to it, to then I'm free to be open, to somewhere in the middle where I can start discerning, again, with my sort of underlying mantra, is it useful, is it kind? Is it going to be contextually helpful to me and to the people around me in the moment, so I can relate to that. But let's talk about, because I know you've got loads of tools, you've got a program to help people who are highly sensitive people. But what are some of the things that would be kind of your top things that people can, if you like, do, or how they can approach it to get themselves, when you think, to live a really happy life. And that's what you say, how to be a highly sensitive person. And how do you say it? Enjoy life, live a happy life.
Reach your full potential, yeah.
Yeah. So what's your kind of top tip?
So really, like, first of all, recognizing that you are. So if you spend time with people and you can find that tiring, depending on the mood of the other person, or if you prefer not to be with, 3 or more people, then the chances are that you're highly sensitive, because it's just too much stimulation. And if you come away from that and you feel tired, then it's too much stimulation. So a lot of people go, I'm a victim of energy vampires. Well, no, what that's happening is you're getting overstimulated, and people take energy from each other all the time in a healthy way. And people can do it in an unhealthy way. But really learning how to be centered and grounded in your own energy gives you the awareness of what's going on for you. And then with that awareness, when other emotions come in or other feelings, or you feel a bit drained or pulled in a certain direction, you point the finger at you and you get grounded again and go, well, am I giving out my energy to this person? Because nobody can take your energy unless you give them permission to do so. So, and this is something that I really talk about in the Master Your Energy online course. So people really understand like what's going on there, and how they, I wish I had another word than manage, but I do actually, how they be with their energy in a really positive way for themselves and for others. Because if you're highly sensitive, you know more than anyone that you're an energetic being. Mm. And you probably know, even if it's not conscious right now, but it's probably going to resonate when I say it, that we are all interconnected. And why do you know that as a highly sensitive person? Because you feel it. It's your everyday experience of life that we're all interconnected. Not only just humans, but birds, pets, even trees, people know that. And that's, everybody feels better when they're out in nature. Why? Because nature's showing them who they really are. Mm. So to be grounded, to be in your body, to know what you're doing with your own energy, that's great for everyone, not just highly sensitive people who are empaths. It's great for everybody.
Yeah, it's kind of that the idea of sort of divine selfishness, really. One of the things I sort of approach that with is the kindness thing. It's like I say, be kind to you. I wrote the Be Kind to You ebook because it brings it back to the self. And the idea that, we do it, I'm going to be kind to that other person because ultimately it's a duty, is not kind to the self. So it's ultimately not kind to anybody. It's that, again, the classic thing is, in those, on an aeroplane where they do the talks about, if we crash and we don't die, it's going to be the thing drops down for the oxygen, put it on you before you put it on your baby. I mean, it's a sort of a common sense thing, but it really points to, I think, an approach that's so true in terms of just general human interaction. And it doesn't mean be an arse, which is how it can be used and interpreted, I do what the hell I like and it doesn't affect anybody else. It's not that. It's that thing you're talking to, which is where if you come in and take care of your own energy, become discerning about, what's the origin of the energy, can be really powerful. And then what's you, what's them. Again, in non-personal awareness, it gets very clear on what matters to you and therefore is connected to you, and what is fundamentally dissonant, if you like, doesn't resonate and therefore isn't in alignment with you. And it's all out there, but it's like, what are you going to tune into? What are you going to be connected to? What are you going to express? So I think that's a really good thing. The other thing I love that you said, is it starts with awareness. Again, we both utterly agree on this. It's like, start where you are. Just the fact that you can identify it in that way, in a useful, powerful way, not to say to give you an excuse for being a victim or those kind of things, but from a perspective of, now I begin, like we had earlier, I begin to understand empathic versus highly sensitive person. What does that mean? How can I then do something, respond to it? You said be with it, manage it, or I would say shift my relationship to it to make it a healthy relationship. Then you're in a place where you can really begin to become the best expression of this beingness, this that you are, right?
Yeah. So just because we're wired differently, just because our arousal gets kicked off sooner and we process much more information and much more minute detail as well as big picture, even though that is the way we're wired, and I'm talking biologically wired, and it's different than the normal population, we are not that. Again, we are what is aware of that. So the reason why this is important to me is people go, oh yeah, but I'm always going to be overwhelmed. And well, no, I used to take my emotions incredibly seriously, because my feelings and my emotions was my way of knowing what I was receiving intuitively. So I'd get the intuitive information, I'd pass it through my body, I'd pay attention, oh, this feels like this, or it brings up that emotion. Oh, okay, that's what that person's feeling. And that was one way of processing it. But when I really understood, and it was funny because this is in my book, but I have to admit, I didn't actually really know it to the depth I know it now. I am what is aware of that. I am not that. And what that means is that, no matter what's going on emotionally with me, I'm just like, wow, isn't that interesting? Because I am what's aware of that. Where before it was like, well, this is what's happening. This is important. I need to take this seriously. And then, the mind loves that because it gives it mental gymnastics. It can hold it forever. Where I'm like, wow, this is interesting. I'm feeling like this right now. Okay. And I can tell that my mind's gone off on a story, and that's why I'm feeling emotional, because the feeling is direct information from the body, and emotion is what the mind's made up about the past and the future. And it's added extra onto the present moment, where feelings really are in the present moment. And if you just acknowledge, oh, look, this is the way I'm feeling. Okay, in this present moment, I'm feeling like this. Do I need to do something with this? And you'll have a clear yes or no if you're not in your head trying to analyze it. So, just because we're wired differently, again, doesn't make us a victim of that.
No.
What's the advantage of being wired differently? What's the advantage of noticing everything? And, as well as the educational things that we've already talked about. And, I remember when I was young, I was about 12 years old, and I was walking towards an alleyway because I was going to be late home from playing. So I was walking towards an alleyway, and, I was not allowed to walk down this alleyway. It's a bit of a stupid thing to do, really. But I was like, if I don't take the alleyway, I have to walk an extra mile home, and I'm already late, and, I'm going to get in trouble. And then I became aware of this person walking behind me, and then when I really thought he was like right behind me, like 5 or 6 feet, when I turned around, he was very far behind me. So, it's just you being able to use that information. Like, I was aware he was there and he was miles back. So I knew that I'm fast enough that, I can just get out of the light and start running, and he's not aware. And he might have been following me, or he might not have been, who knows? But, you can use your sensitivity to advantages. And being highly sensitive, you are incredibly intuitive, because how wouldn't you be?
Yeah.
And again, that intuition, to me, the intuition has always been the part of me that's open to nature, to God, to all that is, whatever it is you want to call it, the universe, source, whatever you want to call it, so to use my sensitivity that I'm innately wired to have, to open up to something that's much bigger than me, and yet it is me, that gives me so much joy in my life. It's what I've been studying since I was 16, but it's what I've known ever since I was born, because of the way I am.
Beautiful. Well, on that, very optimistic, and I love that, really taking the gifts of being a highly sensitive person. Time has rolled on, Fiona. We're kind of got on past what I planned, but it's been a wonderful conversation. So how can people get hold of you, and how can they work with you? We've mentioned the programs. Tell us about that, and tell us about how you help people and how they can get in touch with you.
Okay, great. So my website is realenergy, the number 4, all.com. And on there, under trainings, is Master Your Energy program. It's an online program, so you can take your time with it if you want to. It's 21 days. An email will be delivered every day for 21 days. You can download the videos, audios, PDFs that are part of it, and just use them when you want to, when you have time to. I would recommend doing it every day, but if that's not possible, you can do it a different way. And it brings you through 10 steps to really be able to master your energy, which means work with your energy and benefit from being the energy being that we all are. So I did write this with highly sensitive people in mind, but it's really helpful for the whole population. And when a specific thing comes from a highly sensitive person or an empathic person, an empath, then I actually say, oh, if you're one of these, you need to really pay attention to this particular point. And the people that have taken it so far have just loved it. So they've really loved it. I've had great feedback. So how you can get a hold of me is you can go to my website, or you can email me, Fiona at realenergyforall.com, or if it's easier to remember, Fiona at realenergy. No, sorry, Fiona.realenergy@gmail.com.
I'll put those in the show notes. So if it's like, oh, what was that? Then just go to the show notes, and I'll put the links to Fiona's website, to her program, and her email, right, to get in touch with you. And you also do one-to-one coaching with people. So if they want your personal
touch,
skill and touch, personal touch. And I will say, if you're considering, if you want that kind of really intuitive, I don't think you'll mind me saying this, and I can always edit it out if you don't mind. But I think if you're up for some really direct, permission based, but ultimately, if you're going to work with Fiona, then be ready to be really shown the light of where things are needing to shift. Then she's your gal. Go see her.
Yeah, and that has changed over the years. I always have been very loving and compassionate, which I think you'd agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a good point to make. Yeah, because that's never been my experience. I guess I never felt it, so I didn't raise it. It could come across as she's brash, which is not the case.
Yeah.
But unafraid to, you won't pussyfoot around people, right?
No, I help people turn their life around in 6 sessions mainly.
Yeah.
As a psychologist, it was just warranted that we would live with the person for 3 months. And then they'd probably come back. And then they'd probably have counselling for 5 or 10 years. So, if you want to get through your stuff and you want to get over it quickly, but I do expect you to do work. I will give you work to do. But I call it home play because it's to benefit you and it will be joyful to do it. Then yes, I'm your person.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for taking the time here today. It's been great. I've got some great nuggets from today, and I hope that you, the listener, have also got some great nuggets. Make sure you go and check out Fiona's website. It's realenergyforall. That's the number 4.com. Find it in the show notes. And thanks so much, Fiona. I'll see you soon.
Love, blessings. Take care. Bye.
Well, I really hope you got a lot from that interview. I know I did. And let me know if you like that interview format. Obviously, mostly it's going to be me chatting away the way that I do, but I thought it'd be interesting to include some other people's perspectives from time to time. So let me know how you found that. And also, I recorded this interview on Zoom, which means you can actually see our faces if you check out the post for this episode on my YouTube channel, which again is youtube.com/Joel Young. If you didn't know that, I do every week put up a version on YouTube. Mostly it's just a simple graphic with a waveform and the audio. But when I do an interview with me on Zoom, so I can record the faces, then I thought I might as well put the visuals up there on YouTube, and that's true this week. Now, if you resonate with Fiona, make sure you check out her website. The links are in the show notes, which are this week, of course, beabrillianthuman.com/. /25. In fact, any episode you want to find, you just go www.beabrillianthuman.com/number of episode and you'll find it. And of course, you're also welcome to work through these things with me. You can come work with me one-to-one. You can find out about that, joelyoungmpa.com/sessions. And of course, MPA is a great tool for you, especially if you're learning to handle high sensitivity. As ever, it starts with the MPA process, which you can get for free at mpa4.me/MPA sheet. And finally, if you recognize any of these issues, then having healthy boundaries is going to be super important for you. So I do recommend that you get on the Boundary Bootcamp waitlist, which you can find again at beabrillianthuman.com/boundary bootcamp, like it's one word with all lowercase, and that will get you there. And of course, all these links for Fiona's websites and connections and all those ones I've just mentioned are in the show notes, beabrillianthuman.com/25. So thank you very much for listening. I hope this has stirred you, touched you, given you a perspective that helps you up your game in some form. Remember to subscribe, and if you like what you hear, go tell somebody. And all that remains is to cue the moo.